feel something. They should not say kick. They should say farewell to the guest. We're going to go. One of the questions in our locals community was from Hyphen, who said, ask him about whether or not he's familiar with Chinese infiltration in the Canadian government. We'll get there. That's an entire other can of worms. But that is the segue to say that we are going from America to Canada right now. In the backdrop, I've got Shawn Buckley. Shawn has been on the channel at least, I would say, twice now. And I will probably, at some point in this questioning, refer to him as Jeff Buckley, who did the best rendition of Hallelujah. Well, it wasn't, it was his song. Although then, what's his face took it and did a good version, Leonard Cohen. Shawn Buckley was is a lawyer up in Canada, was one of the masterminds behind the National Citizens Inquiry to look into the COVID response from the government, and has now embarked on another project, which is to give a voice to the vaccine injured up in Canada. We don't have an RFK Jr. up in Canada who is now making a table of presumed injuries resulting from the COVID shot, sort of default compensation for injuries. We don't have an RFK in Canada. We've got a Mark J. Carney, globalist hooer in Canada, who wants nothing more than to ignore in as much as possible and then euthanize in as much as possible anyone who may have been injured by the COVID shot. Shawn Buckley, I'm going to bring him in right now and he's going to introduce himself. Sir, how goes the battle? Refresh everybody's memory if they don't remember who you are, and tell us what you're doing with the Allison Inquiry. You had a space yesterday that I couldn't get to on X, but tell everybody who you are, what you're doing, and what is this Allison Inquiry?
Yeah, so, I mean, by way of background, I've been practicing law for 31 years and focusing on constitutional issues. So, I mean, my bailiwick is being a constitutional lawyer. And then, we hit COVID, and I basically see a police state happening. I mean, I appreciate that in some of the states in the US, it was pretty bad. In the province where I live in Alberta, David, Rachel Notley, who was the opposition leader at the time, was publicly calling during COVID for the army to go door to door. And when I would lecture in Alberta, I haven't asked this question for a while, but I'd ask the audience, I'd say, okay, during the dark days of COVID, we're all locked down and our prime minister is publicly calling anyone who won't take the vaccine racists and misogynists, and asking the rhetorical question, how long will we tolerate them? And we've got the opposition leader, Rachel Notley, calling for the army to go door to door. I'd ask, in the dark days of COVID, put up your hand if you honestly believed that the army was going to be going door to door, dragging unvaccinated people out of their homes and forcefully vaccinating them. Some audiences, over 3/4 of the arms went up. I've never had an audience in Alberta where less than half of the arms would go up. And so the level of fear was just astronomical. And then, but everyone's kind of gone into hibernation mode. It's like the whole country is traumatized and is just wanting to completely forget about COVID. But the problem, David, is so many of us are injured and so many of us have died that we've got this huge elephant in the room. And how long can, half of the country pretend that it's long COVID? Because that's what, and this is, we can talk about how this Allison Inquiry came up, but what's fascinated me is that I've come to realize how much of a bubble we live in. So what's happening with this Allison Inquiry is we are, for the very first time, going to have members of Parliament on Parliament Hill listening to vaccine-injured Canadians tell their story. Well, in leading up to this, is this politically feasible to do? We were meeting with MPs, my wife Teresa and I, because MP Dean Allison, who is going to be chairing this, had asked us, can you find any other MPs that would be willing to sit so that if I decide to do this, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one in this committee room listening to vaccine injured persons. Well, I learned that, pretty well every single member of Parliament lives in a completely different world than I do. You and I, David, PCR test, dying with COVID as opposed to of COVID, just even starting some of the first themes. We eat, breathe, drink it. We know it. We've been angry about it. And we forget that there's a world out there where what the mainstream media says is true. So they actually believe that the vaccine saved lives. They actually believe that all of these injuries, like everyone, you can't hide the injuries and you can't hide the deaths, but they believe these injuries were caused by long COVID. And they'd also even, believe that, there's a danger to creating vaccine hesitancy. So, well, now this is interesting. And, when we hold beliefs, they're hard to change. Like, could you imagine if the truth was that, these vaccines really didn't cause that much harm, that it really was long COVID, and this information started to come out? Like, I don't know about you, but I'd resist. What the heck are you talking about here, right?
I think and I like to think it's not because I'm stubborn and entrenched, it's because I'm right. If someone were to come out and say the vaccines didn't cause anything and it was all COVID, the sudden deaths, I might never be able to believe that. And I don't know what I would have to see by way of evidence, because I wouldn't believe the evidence, because I simply don't believe anything. I don't believe the exact opposite. I just don't believe when they try to convince me. So yeah, it's interesting. I would never believe that these were safe and effective. I wouldn't even believe that they were safe, knowing what I know now. And I actually just had John Bodwin on yesterday, who's done amazing work documenting COVID deaths, COVID injuries, what were falsely identified as COVID versus vaccine. And I did learn something new, that those little spiky things on the outside of the COVID ball are that's the spike proteins on the COVID virus itself. And so it is, at least from what I understood, conceptually possible to definitively say when someone dies with spike protein in their bodies, but no COVID virus, then it's from the jab and not from the virus. But all that to say, yeah, I'm not sure that I could ever be convinced it was safe, let alone effective.
Well, now remember, we were all polarized. Like, so when you hold a belief and it's become emotional, it's really tough. And, like in the freedom community in Canada and likely in the US, I mean, there's literal anger. Like, why haven't you done something, Congress? Why haven't you done something, Senate? In Canada, why haven't you done something, Parliament? I mean, where's the justice? Where's the, name it as you will. Well, how are they going to do anything if they actually still need to be convinced that there's something to fix? Like, I'm just sharing with you, we've learned.
Well, let me ask you this, because now that you mentioned it, how can they be convinced that they did harm? I don't think they ever will, because for them to admit it would be for them to effectively incriminate themselves. And so I know you've got MP Allison, who's one of, I don't know how many few MPs who's going to participate in this. Are you running into them basically saying, we don't believe it and we want nothing to do with this inquiry on the conservative side?
No, actually, what we're finding is the opposite's happening. It's almost like there's this glass wall where we're not allowed to talk about COVID injuries or vaccine injuries in Canada is being shattered. I was on a podcast 3 days ago with a medical doctor, a Canadian medical doctor, and I said, would it be possible for a medical doctor today in Canada to actually start speaking honestly about the COVID vaccine and saying, it's caused a lot of harm. We need to recognize that and actually start treating vaccine injury. And this medical doctor said, no, they'd be professionally disciplined and likely lose their right to practice. Well, MPs feel the same way. They've actually been afraid to publicly do anything that would call into question the vaccines. Well, we think that this is actually going to be the opening. So, what happened is my wife, Teresa, and I are out in Parliament Hill last October dropping off these health charter petitions, third largest paper petition in Canadian history. We're dropping them off to another MP. And a friend said, well, you got to meet this Dean Allison. You're in Ottawa. So we meet with him the next day. And he mentions, and he's one of the few vaccines that did not, or MPs that did not take the vaccine. Yeah, my birds are going crazy.
I didn't want to say anything. I thought I heard birds.
No, it's fine. Birds. They've just decided it's time to fly around. But, so he got excluded from Parliament. He didn't take the vaccine. And so he's been kind of a magnet for vaccine injured Canadians. And he said to us, I would like to hold an inquiry just listening to vaccine injured Canadians, because he knew that Teresa and I had been main organizers at the National Citizens Inquiry. And we said, well, we may be willing to help you if you decide to do that. Well, months go by and the my wife Teresa feels that the need to reach out to him and follow up, and we start this dialogue. And we're back and forth, and Zoom call with his main aide, who thought this was a horrible idea, would destroy his career, and all of this. And finally, we have this phone call where MP Dean Allison is explaining to us all the reasons why he can't hold an inquiry just to listen to vaccine-injured Canadians. And I'm a believer in Jesus, and he is too. And so we can talk to each other a certain way. And I just said, stop. You're focusing on the wrong things. You're focusing on why we can't do this. But the only question is, are you supposed to do this? Right? Like, are you supposed to do this? Yeah, and also we've got the website, AllisonInquiry.com. So we just ended the call. We said, you go and answer that. You go and pray and answer the question, are you supposed to do this? Well, we thought it was done, David. And about 10 days later, Dean contacts us and says, no, I'm supposed to do this. So now listen, this is interesting. And this speaks a lot about his character. Is he said, regardless of the consequences, I'm going ahead with this. Now, he's been a conservative MP. So for your American listeners, that would be the equivalent to a Republican.
A Republican
so
would be a Republican not necessarily governor or senator, maybe something along. It would be more like a Republican senator.
Right. So he's been a conservative member of parliament for 22 years. And he was thinking it was a realistic possibility he would get kicked out of the party over this, and that he would be absolutely made a monkey of with the mainstream media, which is behind the US media on truth issues. But he decides to go ahead anyway. We decide to help him. So this is not a government inquiry. This is not a party inquiry. I don't know how Senator Johnson does it in the US. Like, there's got to be budgets for senators to hold independent inquiries. In Canada, there's none. So actually, we're citizens having to organize this. We've created a not-for-profit. And David, we're just at the stage now. I'm going to be calling the witnesses as counsel at this inquiry. Today was the first day I started the witnesses that have been selected by the team. I'm starting to read their materials. And I now have to start making the calls to witnesses. I have to ask them if they can pay their own way, because the public donations have been so scarce. I was hoping that we could confidently say, we will pay your airfare, we will pay for your hotels. Many of them will need to travel with a support person because they're so injured. I mean, I pick up a witness this morning, a poor girl who's like 16 years old at the time. She's in high school, plays soccer, plays volleyball. The minute she got her first shot, it's almost like she could feel it was killing her. It's just this cold, awful sensation. And within 4 days, she can't walk without a walker and is now wheelchair bound. Ever since, severe pain in her leg. She can walk now a little bit with a walker after 5 years and is in constant pain. They had to move her bedroom from upstairs downstairs, rent a hospital bed because the wheelchair the mother had to quit work for a year, and the wheelchair won't go through the bathroom door. It's awful.
What did she get? Was it transverse myelitis, or was it is it a form of GBS? They don't actually have a formal diagnosis, and they gaslit this poor girl for years. Like, she got her medical records, and the odd doctor and neurologist said, yeah, this is vaccine injury, but they would never say that to her face. They actually had the audacity to say, well, you should see a psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. So, a 16-year-old girl who plays soccer and volleyball is all of a sudden in a wheelchair and can't walk, and you're telling her she's faking it? Like, they did the same thing to Maddie DeGarry. They did the same thing to Kayla Pollock. They say it's in your head, and then they mark it down as a tummy ache. But now, I guess the question is this: the National Citizens, the NCI for the COVID response, it was an amazing hearing. It was documented, everything, all of the government abuses. People are going to say, unfortunately, nothing is material is going to come out of it until you have a government that is prepared to make the change. what is the ultimate objective with this? You're going to have 4 days where vaccine injured are going to tell their story, have an audience, Parliament Hill in Ottawa, capital of Canada. Which MPs have confirmed that they're going to attend?
So now you're going to have to ask Dean Allison that question. Now, some have approached him and said, I am willing to attend. And, we're early in this process, and we're asking the public, so, to go to our website, AllisonInquiry.com, and we actually have instructions on there on how to approach your MP. But David, what's interesting about this is we hold a press conference on June 4th, just announcing that we're going to hold an inquiry listening to vaccine injured Canadians. Well, Dean posts on Facebook, 2 posts on Facebook, just, I'm holding this inquiry. He gets over 1 million views in 24 hours. And this has just exploded outside of the echo chamber. Like, people are coming to him. He gave me an example. Yeah, there's actually this constituent comes to me and says, oh, I just got diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. Could it be the vaccine? My wife Teresa is talking to a travel agent yesterday who's telling her, who we're getting to do the travel arrangements for this inquiry. And this person's telling my wife, oh, I have long COVID. Like, she's actually horribly disabled. And I'm in a long COVID support group. Remember the bubbles, right? And so Teresa starts talking to her. Well, when did this happen? Well, all of it happened immediately after a vaccine. And at the end of the call, she came to realize, because she asked, well, what are you guys doing? And came to realize, no, she's vaccine injured. She doesn't need to be in a long COVID support group. She needs to be in a support group, like CanRise 19 of, COVID vaccine injuries. What's happening is this middle group that believes in long COVID, that, watches our government funded media, is coming to understand there's a different narrative. So that's why this is so cool, is because, if we can get to the point where we can have an honest conversation, and our doctors could have an honest conversation, then we can help these people.
Well, let me be more brash. I will not swear because I don't want to offend anybody. What I'm taking away is that you still have very few, if any, conservative MPs with a pair that are prepared to actually stand up and say anything now 6 years out. None. I can name two. Sorry. I
enjoyed how you phrased that. So
no, because I know of 2 conservative MPs that I've always been not say impressed with, who I thought were good in the fight. Roman Baber and Matt Strauss. I don't know that they want me praising them, because I might be persona non grata or public enemy number 1 to the Conservatives and the Liberals in Canada. Other than that, and I don't know where they're at right now. So the bottom line is, the so-called Conservative Party, that is the so-called opposition party of Canada, are still a bunch of feckless cowards, if not complicit actors, who have yet to do anything and are still playing ball with their co-tyrants, who are the majority government now.
This is a huge problem, Viva, with every single party. And again, from my perspective, if I'm on a freedom call, I'll have people criticizing, saying, well, why isn't there accountability? What are you talking about? Holding an inquiry, just listening to vaccine injured persons. But, the reality is a lot of these people have no idea. And the first step is even introducing this idea, and they're afraid. We need to create political pressure because we're harming people. And I'm as frustrated as anyone else. I closed my law practice to run the NCI, hoping that we could get out of the echo chamber and hoping that we could change things. And the NCI did change things, but it didn't change government, and we didn't kill this narrative. But in Canada, there's so many angles. The last time I was on your show, we were talking about how they're taking property rights away in this UNDRIP thing and all of that. It's happening so fast. I think this is going to explode. I think people are going to wake up, and this is going to be a big thing, because as resistant as the other side is, could you imagine you're a parent and you vaccinated your kids? Well, even if nothing's bad's happened, everyone seems to be injured around me. And once they realize that this was completely, to use the most generous term I can, completely reckless, because I could use other terms, completely reckless, they're going to be mad as can be.
I will say from your mouth to God's ears, I just don't see it happening, because if you have, I see such contrarianism in Canada, but only to all things remotely American. And if RFK Jr. comes out and says X, you're going to get so-called conservative Canadians in Canada, not conservative Canadians, but conservative members of government saying not X, simply because, hey, they're not American and we're different, and at least we're not American.
I think we should explain this for your American audience. So what happened in Canada is, first time Trump was elected, like, I'm sorry, as somebody living outside of America, I could not get my head around how the media in America just was consistently attacking him his whole first term. Now, you can hate somebody, but you don't denigrate the office of the President of the United States. And, you don't be completely one-sided. And I mean, the rest of the world watched this. Now, then we have, a Biden term, and now we've got Trump reelected. Well, the governing party in Canada is the Liberal Party. I mean, just think of the Democratic Party, but even more communist, if that's possible. But it's true, okay? So just imagine Democrats that are actually farther left, and they're continually in power. Like, you could almost argue that we're a one-party state in Canada, because they have so much control over the media and so much control over the bureaucracy. So they have made a political decision. Well, let's become anti-American. So our government-funded media. So we've actually got Canadian Broadcast Corporation, which is a government propaganda tool, and in addition, the government funds the other major media outlets. So they're probably the biggest advertiser or alternative funder. And, we can go back to Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky in the 70s. I mean, that affects media. I mean, you don't have to be rocket scientists. So we have taken the political position, well, let's be anti-American, like anti-Trump. And so everything we're just absolutely destroying ourselves, but our government is completely bent on transforming us into a communist nation, and quickly. They're on a very quick timetable. And to do that, they're using anti-Americanism, which is absolutely crazy.
Well, but it's not just the Liberals. That's the problem. It's also in the spirit, to a great extent, of the Conservatives. I mean, to the point, this is more liberal than conservative, but where they say literally don't drink Florida orange juice, because stick it to America to get scurvy and vitamin D deficiency. But no, the problem is the Conservatives, they ran with the anti-Trump, anti-American sentiment in the last federal election, thinking it would win. They haven't come back from it. And I don't think they're going to do squat over this. I think they're going to get their media, or the media, state funded. Everybody knows this. CBC, Radio-Canada, directly funded. All the other legacy media, indirectly funded through subsidies, through advertising, through bailouts, whatever. They're going to blacklist you, blackball you, or demonize the event and call it, the trucker convoy 2.0, more extremism, racism, xenophobia, whatever. And they're going to scare the feckless cowards that are the Conservative MPs from any participation whatsoever. And I think that they are.
I'm actually hopeful that won't happen. So, for example, a couple of things have changed. It's, first of all, the Liberal voters and those voters that the Conservative Party wants, that kind of the middle, soccer moms, they're now having this debate and waking up. And, after the first press conference, I forget the guy's name. He's a Liberal MP on the Standing Committee of Health, and he's a medical doctor. And he was just going after Dean hard, like, with all this emotional stuff, like, where were you during COVID when I was saving lives in the emergency ward? Which is funny. I had to go to the emergency ward twice during COVID because of like an injury, right? Like a wound. And it's the only time in my life where I walked in and there was no one there. In fact, they had a whole bunch of meds. Can we film us, stitching you up here, because we have nothing to do. Right. But anyway, this guy's hard on Dean. Where were you during the, COVID when I'm saving lives in the emergency ward? And how dare you create vaccine hesitancy? Well, even a year ago, probably the mob would have been all over Dean. Instead, the mob was against this guy. Like, there were supporters, but the vast majority was, against this fellow with, the standard narrative. And I think we've reached that point, and I pray we reach that point where there's just so many injuries and so many people know it's the vaccine that you just can't deny it anymore and have any credibility, and people are angry about it. Like, David, we hope that you come. This is the first time that alternative media is going to be able to get permission to go into a committee room on Parliament Hill. And so I'm formally inviting you, let us know. We just hope that you'd live stream it. And there'll be witnesses coming and going, and we can't speak for them, but many of them I expect will be willing to be interviewed by the media. So September 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th. Because I know you were at the trucker convoy. And you
no, I was there. I was just trying to Google. I was told I was put on a no entry list for media. I forget which part of Parliament Hill, but I might have other travel restrictions. Shawn, we'll talk about that.
I can't speak to that. All I know is that I can get through MP Dean Allison, that controls that committee room, permission for you to enter. If you're on some other blacklist, it'd be interesting. We could have you at the next press conference to see. I think that's mid-August.
Here, I do hope to be made a fool of for my expectation of what the Conservatives will do in terms of their willingness to participate and to support this. So make me look stupid, and I hope, but I don't have any faith for them or in them. And it's amazing what you're doing, but I just feel that it's going to fall on deaf ears. And it might be a question of our respective perspectives. When you look at parents who have vaccinated or given that jab to their kids, and you say they are going to want justice right now, we didn't give it to our kids, and by the grace of God. Mm-hmm. But my expectation of the human condition is that they're going to never want to talk about it again, because it might turn out that they harmed the very people that they were entrusted by God to protect. And admitting that is going to be too much, that they caved to the pressure, to the moment, to the propaganda, and they just want to forget about it. It's the easiest way of coping with the trauma. That would be my perspective.
Oh, no, I think you're onto something. I think, first of all, any belief that's, became emotional in COVID, we split families and friendships over our beliefs on this one. So we've got that hurdle. And how do you admit you've done something that's either harmed yourself or a loved one? But at the same time, we have to have that conversation. We just absolutely have to. And then, I actually believe that God's going to turn Canada around and we're going to become a free nation again.
What can people do? Where do they go to support it? And what can they expect? So
there's several things we need people to do. So, anyone in the audience, American or Canadian, please donate, because the reality is, we need these vaccine injured to be able to fly to Ottawa, stay in a hotel, and testify. And we have no money right now, and we're like 9 weeks out. So please support us financially. If you're Canadian, we have instructions on the website on how to approach your MP. Doesn't matter what party it is, because this isn't a party event. Talk to your MP, call your MP, visit your MP. If you're not willing to do that, we've got sample letters. So, do that. And then we want the media to attend. So, Viva, it would be really cool. Like I say, we could do a test. We could have you come to the next press conference and see if we can get you in Parliament Hill. Well, it'd be good for you to know too, right? Because
if I can't get there in person, I'll do it. I'll definitely, live stream on the internet. But yeah, it would be a trip down memory lane to get back.
Well, you're kind of like a folk hero up here with what you did during the trucker convoy.
I think I pissed off a lot of people during the last election, so-called Conservatives, who didn't like what my righteous criticism.
I'm just talking about the average Canadian, right? So and that footage is going to be historical. So I hope you're backing it up and
it's
an extra copy in the underground bunker somewhere, right?
you make me nervous. I don't think I've backed up all of the live streams, but I'm sure that they're out there. But I'll make sure to do it.
Yeah.
So, but Shawn, bottom line, people can donate. People can go to the website to find out how to approach their MPs, put a little pressure on them. Do you have your victim vaccine injured list already established, or you're finalizing?
No.
that?
So in fact, here's the thing: I think we're between 700 and 800 applications right now, and we're only going to be able to call about 40 people. But we want people to apply, because what happens is we've got this short form, you fill in, and then we send you a longer form. If we don't call you as a witness, we're asking you to consent for your written part to form part of a record. Because wouldn't it be something if we had thousands of stories in writing that we could have table as part of the official record of this inquiry? It would send a much stronger message. But we're finding, David, that the vaccine injured as a group, many of them are so fragile that even filling in that form, they're finding traumatic because it's like a medical type form. Well, first, some of them have been bedridden and in constant pain now for 5 years. And so they're like worn out physically and spiritually and emotionally. And many of them have been so gaslit and ill-treated by the medical community that filling in a medical type form is traumatizing them. Like they're actually giving us this feedback. And then, if you're selected to testify and your doctors haven't said this is a vaccine injury, we've got some volunteer doctors. We want to just talk to you and just make sure it's reasonable. So we're not attacked for just putting anyone up there. Well, some people are just horrified about the idea of having to speak to a volunteer doctor that is philosophically in tune with accepting that you're vaccine injured, right? Because they're the only ones that volunteer for this type of project. So it's been interesting. It's been absolutely fascinating. Your audience, on our website, AllisonInquiry.com, there's a press conference tab. And the July 9th press conference, we had Michelle Wharton, who's vaccine injured, tell her story. It's about 15 minutes. You will weep. It was funny, Viva. We started the press conference and MP Dean Allison's talking. They're just doing the wide angle shot. They're not interested at all. Michelle starts talking. All of a sudden, they're doing the close-ups and they're engaged. And they were in tears by the end because her story is so compelling. I mean, she was a young, healthy mom, hikes mountains and high altitude skiing, has no medical record. The only time she would touch the medical system was to go and give birth. And then, within a day, she's basically, bedridden. She cystic masses all over her body. One, compressing her brain. She had to fundraise and go to the US to get brain surgery because it was, there was this brain compression. Her story is just absolutely tragic on several levels. And it would drive home to your audience why these people even need permission to share their stories. And it will shame the MPs. Like that's the thing I learned at the National Citizens Inquiry is once these people are allowed to speak in a formal setting and you hear their stories, like, they're speaking the truth and it changes you. Like it changes you. And we know because this has just exploded into the voter base that even the MPs that don't come are going to be watching, and the policy wonks, they're called the short pants by the MPs from all parties, are going to be watching these hearings. And I don't think Canada will be the same, but we need your help getting there. We need, we definitely need some help financially. And so whatever you can give would be great. We're all volunteers. Nobody's getting paid here, but we've got to pay travel expenses and AV expenses and the like.
I'm going to put all the links in the pinned comment in the description so people can find it. And I hope to be wrong, but I just think these guys, they have no shame, some of them. So, and I think too many of them have no shame and too much pride. So hope to be wrong.
Well,
Shawn,
I think it's shocking that we could be so divided as a nation and we could go through all of this. But, when we were running the National Citizens Inquiry, we only got one lawmaker who spoke, and that was an MLA from Saskatchewan. Her last name was Wilson. I think it was Nadine Wilson. And she testified at our Regina COVID hearings in the spring of 2024. And she said what happened was, COVID is starting. They're having some dialogue. She was with the governing party in Saskatchewan. They're having some initial dialogue. And then Trudeau had all the premiers go to Ottawa, and their premier, I think it was Mo at the time, comes back, and all of a sudden there's no discussion amongst the governing party, and everything's getting shut down, and public health is doing all of this, and there is no discussion by the lawmakers. And I expect that happened in every province, that delegation was given to public health. And I expect it happened because in Parliament, they weren't having the discussion. But, you know, I remember O'Toole, who was the Conservative member at the time, standing up and complaining to the government that the vaccine wasn't getting approved fast enough. Like, you know, you're right. There was no party standing up to basically, you know, for caution or for rights or medical consent or anything like that. But, you know, I've come to realize we've got to, first of all, accept we made a mistake, which is what this inquiry is about, introducing the fact that we've harmed people. And then hopefully we can have a conversation about, well, now what do we do?
I hope you are successful in this venture. I don't want to say I'm black-pilled, but I think I am. And having seen what I saw after the ostrich slaughter and the inaction and the total silence and the acceptance, look, anything I can do, I'm here. And we'll try to wake some people up and make it an event. And I hope that you succeed in this, because they are people who deserve to have a voice and deserve to have representatives who actually represent them, instead of literally offering some of them death under Canada's MAIDS program. So, Shawn, let's see. Fingers crossed. I say, plan for the best, or is it hope for the best, plan for the worst? But let's try to get this out there and shame some MPs into
you know,
conduct.
we've got to save the United States of America, and we've got to save Canada, because, you know, when every other country went communist, they could go to Canada or the US. Where are we going to go? We got nowhere to flee to, so we got to stop it here.
Let's make it happen, Shawn. I'll put up all the links and people can find you on X.
Yeah, Shawn Buckley Law on X. Yep, Shawn Buckley Law.
Buckley with an E.
Yeah, Shawn Buckley with an E. So ShawnBuckley.
Shawn, we'll talk again, and we'll do a follow-up, and I'll talk to you offline about potential September.
Thanks, David.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon. And we're going to, I got to hit this button here. There we go.